Welcome to Friday night's video in our Master Series. This, I do believe, is the 54th video in our Master Series, the 24th video in our first phase processing, and the third video in our equalization stage. In this video, we want to address different type of equalizers. This can be a huge problem. I've seen all kinds of equalizers, every kind of equalizer you can imagine. For the most part, that when I'm working and doing static EQ, I use a parametric EQ. But there are lots of different EQs for different situations. I mean, you have channel strip types of EQs, console emulations of equalizers on actual consoles, and all kinds of things. The problem with these is that you really don't it's very hard to visualize what you're doing and what you're attenuating and boosting and knowing exactly what's happening with that. For me anyway, that's been an issue. So for the most part, I have a bunch of different EQs in my DAW that emulate different things. You know, it's console strip EQs like this, some vintage EQ looking kind of things, you know, and channel strips themselves that are just basic EQs that are basically, you know, not very complicated. You can see what they're doing, but the detailed kind of work that you're going to be trying to be doing, these kind of EQs can be great. Some of these vintage EQs emulations, like my Ozone one, for just addressing some simple issue you're having. So they can be used in some circumstances. So I don't discount them, but I don't really fond of them for a couple of reasons that I've spoke of, that they're not real accurate. They don't have as many options to analyze the audio and see what's going on and address issues. But they can be helpful sometimes if you just have, you know, something you want to address that's just a real small issue that you're just going to pull out a channel strip EQ or some EQ that you might have in your DAW or some boutique EQ that you've bought to deal with some certain type of issues. You know, I mean, that's not unheard of. But I don't really see much purpose for that when you have even something like this. It's a decent, this is just a standard EQ that I have in my DAW. You know, I mean, it's not probably that different from the one in Pro Tools or anything like that. And it does a pretty dang good job. You know, I've got so many nodes. I can deal with the low end, the high end, and I've got about 5 nodes to deal with anything else. And if I have more work that I need to do than that, I can put them in series and things like that. So I'm really fond of them doing this type of work. I have a Neutron one that's a really nice one. My Neutron one, I mean, it can get to really fine detail as far as my band shapes and things like that. What kind of filtering I might be doing, you know. I mean, it can get pretty detailed. And you know, my Ozone equalizer, I mean, it's got some pretty complicated algorithms and complex algorithms for doing equalization, analog, digital. It can analyze my mid-side and things like that if I want to analyze that, which isn't unheard of, but I don't really address that. If I'm hearing an issue, I'll go look at that, but I don't fuss with that too much. If you're having issues with your left and right side, I've started to use this plugin to look at that stuff, and I'm not really sure I did it because I think it was an issue other than I just had it available very conveniently, and so I'll use my plugin to check those out to see if I have any differences in there. But some of the algorithms are very complicated, and even on this one, I've got a nice brick wall, you know, frequency limiter here that's great for some things. You know, I mean, it just really is. I mean, I'm not going to argue that point. And, you know, just the standard, you know, nodes, I mean, are pretty good. You know, they got some pretty complex algorithms. And this one's even got a surgical mode to really get some fine detailed work. So I don't disqualify those kind of things. And dynamic EQs. Dynamic EQs, you know, compressing and boosting and having it flow with the music. Then I've got one in my Ozone, and I've got a TDR Nova that I like. But I normally use these sometimes when I'm thinking about compression and expansion and trying to do it with an equalizer, which does come up every now and then, but most of the time I try to keep things pretty simple. I've got a couple of tools like this Spectro. This thing is pretty wild. I mean, it actually takes a piece of the sound, and you can do some detailed work on attenuating and boosting some parts of the spectrum, which is really kind of wild tool, and it's really good for like sound sculpting things. And just like my isotope or my RX stuff. My RX stuff is great for that because I can actually get in there, use equalizer on it, and I can also get it really in there to look at what's going on in the harmonic content and attenuate and boost all kinds of frequency ranges and down to very minute levels in very specific work. But most of the time that's in sound sculpting, or if I'm repairing something, or if I'm having a serious problem, then I'll get into that. For the most part, whenever I'm doing equalization work, I use one of my parametric EQs. And I have gotten to the point, I've got some isotope equipment, but I use that for very surgical stuff. And I'll most of the time go to my stock EQ in my DAW. I've gotten used to using it, so that's not necessarily to say it's better. So I mean, I'm not going to go there because my isotope stuff's pretty good, and I'll use it now and then. I really haven't changed over at this point to where I've used this one and taught with this one so long. I'm really comfortable with it, and I'm really familiar with it, and so it's one of those kind of things that the other one might be better, but I'm really comfortable with this one, and I've got presets set all over the place, and I'm just not really ready to make that change because I haven't had any need to. I'll go to my isotope stuff when I really have some detailed work to do, or I need to get really finicky about something, and it has to be really super precise, which normally I've dealt with in my sound sculpting, and at this phase that I really don't need to. So when I talk about EQ, some of those, you can get all kinds of different equalizers. They'll do all kinds of different things, and you really need to read about them, find out what they're doing, and they can be used in certain applications. I mean, I might have a situation to where I just need to boost some frequency, and I just ain't found any reason why I'd want to go to one of my other mentioned EQ emulation or something like that, rather than just pull out my Parametric EQ and go and finding the problem, sweeping around or whatever. But there's a place for them, and it's nice to have them. You may come up with some reasons. I really haven't, because first of all, this is a better EQ, and my isotope one's a much better EQ, and I can't see any reason why I'd want to use that unless it was emulating something. I mean, if I wanted to emulate having some console EQ or something like that, and and it might give it some certain sound of it's got the sound of this desk or something like that. The EQs, I don't fuss with that too much because I do my stuff in sound sculpting. I don't want analog emulation crap all over my mix because I normally just don't. Sometimes I will, and we've talked about trying to and making a decision on sound quality and production quality. And sometimes later on, I do want it to emulate like it was recorded in some area. And some of those emulation plugins can help that to happen if you're trying to do that. But most of the time, I deal with that when I'm doing my sound sculpting. So I really don't have a lot of pushing for any other type of EQ for you to work with. That I do recommend some type of parametric EQ, maybe your stock EQ, or buying one like I got one from Isotope that does a really good job, and learn to use it well. Then you can basically use it in any circumstance that you have and get familiar using it without having a whole bunch of other plugins, unless you have a specific purpose for them or you're really comfortable with them. Like, you might be sitting there and go, no, I pull this EQ out because I've found that I like it to do for some reason that it does something for me, and so I'll use it, or I've got this vintage ozone EQ that for some reason I don't know why, or channel strips, things are trying to emulate, like console, plug or plug-in equipment or console equipment that's standard on some kind of console. There's lots of those, and I've not really found any use for them, to be honest with you. But sometimes that can be a workflow thing. I've seen people that this is just ridiculous to them because they've got a few parameters on their desk and on their console, on their mix desk, that they boost the low, the mid, the highs, the mid, and they've got one that they can adjust, to sweep around for frequencies, and they're good to go. Their workflow has been working like that for a long time, and they're really good at using them, and so they don't really see the purpose of it. and they might pull out something like this. This might seem really exotic to them. It's like, that is a really fancy piece of gear. I got this knob, bro. I turn this knob up, bass, mid range, da da da, and on, so and such like that. I don't really agree with that, but they've been using them for a long time. So, and some of them, I've heard some really good stuff, but this is just better equipment. It just is. I mean, it just you can get some parametric EQs like my one that I got from from Isotope. It is just a phenomenal piece of equipment, and I mean a piece of software and equalizer. So I'm really recommending I stay with the parametric EQ for no matter what I'm trying to do, no matter what type of work I'm trying to do, because you get familiar with it, you understand it real well, you understand what issues it might have, you know what it's going to do to a certain piece of audio, you get comfortable with it. If they come out with a better one, buy a better one. If it goes up, does that make sense? Or if they come out with some whole new type of EQ, that's great, bro. What does that do? Whoa, yeah. And it's like, but, and there are things like that. I almost bought the one from, I don't remember. I know some company made this new EQ, and I almost bought it, but I let things ride for a while until I see, well, yeah, that's an actual positive change and step forward in software and equalization before I'm going to commit to it. So, and I'm pretty slow to do that until it's been around for a little while. So I really recommend you really get to know your parametric EQ and get to know it well and be able to use it well in any situation that you need to do equalization in. So peace, self-love. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next video that we are going to do some static equalization.